Westminster is no newcomer when it comes to a sex problem, with new MPs often warned to stay away from dozens of dodgy colleagues.
Well, to discuss that now, we're joined by former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Morning to you, Charlie. So this story is one that keeps haunting the corridors of power. And also this week we saw in the European Union, there are, I think, 37 complaints have come out. So it's not just confined to Westminster, but it is a recurrent issue. How serious is the kind of allegation of this being endemic, a culture of sexual harassment?
Well, as you say, it's the second complaint labelled against Garrett, who has been suspended, and that's absolutely right. And I think it's vital that when these stories come up, when these allegations are made, that there is a system in place where the political parties take the necessary action to make sure that they can investigate that allegation properly, in quick order, and restore trust, because it's about trust, it's about power, it's about an abuse of power, potentially, depending on the particular situation or the allegation that's been made. But as long as there is a safe situation in place, or a situation in place where you can investigate quickly, you do suspend members of Parliament, you can investigate and get an outcome. And if that person is not fit for office, then they should not be in Parliament.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got this now second formal complaint against Geraint Davies, and in response, the Labour MP Charlotte Nichols has spoken out about her experience in Westminster. And she says when she was first elected in 2019, she was quite literally handed a list of 30 names of MPs and was told, do not accept a drink from these people, do not get in a lift with these people, do not spend time one-on-one with them. Is it really that widely known? And if it is, why is so little done about it?
Well, I think it's... it's obviously very difficult, and hearing that is very difficult, because that was never my experience, and I know it tends to be, I think, or a number of the allegations that we've heard, particularly in this case, is a male MP versus female staffers. We had the Westminster scandal where it was a number of young women that were more affected than most. So it's a harrowing sort of detail there. But I think, look, there just has to be a system in place where you hear those kind of... well, the difficult thing is getting into rumour and gossip versus the reality of an actual allegation or act that is, misconduct, essentially. So you have to have... But in all of those areas, you have to have a place and a safe space where people can come forward and say, look, I'm uncomfortable about this, or I've heard about that. And it just needs a proper investigation to make sure that there is a conclusion where if a Member of Parliament that is in a position of responsibility has acted inappropriately, then they are dealt with effectively and quickly.
And full credit to the Labour Party. They've acted swiftly. They've put this guy on suspension while it's being looked into. That's the right thing to do. Moving on to the other story of the ongoing COVID inquiry, the judicial review, Boris's phone. Very interesting yesterday how Boris volunteered his phone and he kind of cut Rishi out the deal. Now, of course, the phone he gave over is a more recent phone, post April 2021. That's almost after the event of lockdown, so not sure how much we will get out of that. But how significant is it, Boris volunteering this and, if, in a sense, going over Rishi's head?
Well, it is significant. I mean, I think, look, what matters here is trust. Trust throughout COVID has clearly been broken because of Partygate. And the public have an absolute right to know what decisions were made, how those decisions were made during a time where everybody made such huge sacrifice. And I think, look, for Boris, I think he might have been a little bit frustrated that the story was becoming about him not handing over however many notebooks he had, 24, I believe. And so I think, look, he's determined to make sure that there is an open, transparent process. That's what everybody wants. And I think, look, he's offered to hand over one mobile phone. I think there's another mobile phone that predates...
So the juicy phone, the old phone, that will have all of the lockdown one, that will have all of the Dominic Cummings stuff, the Rishi Sunak, that will be the real, if you like, the Hancock Diaries Part 2. Is that going to have to be surrendered or seized at some point, do you think? Or will Boris just get away with that phone kind of drifting into obscurity?
Well, I think he's been very forward and volunteered that phone. I think it has to go through sort of the security services check because it hasn't been switched on for some time. And that was the advice that the security sort of services gave him to not turn it back on. So you have to get over that little hurdle. But I think what the crux of it is that, look, it's not good optics. So, government has set up an inquiry. It's now taking that inquiry to court because it hadn't worked out how the process was going to work from the off. So it's very, very difficult from that respect. But I think what people want is the answers to why decisions were made, how they were made, without, particularly any of the other the noises off. And I think, look, someone has to do the sift somewhere through the information, where it's the Cabinet Office who then, if they feel that there will be irrelevant WhatsApps, there'll be WhatsApps about, what takeaway you're going to get that night. Now, is that relevant to the inquiry? Do you want to hand that all over to the inquiry for them to go through? And, it might elongate the process, because what we want is an inquiry that is concluded quickly and as open and transparent as possible. So it's the balance between who is going to do the sift of what's relevant and what isn't. And obviously that's the main crux of the dispute, whether it's the Cabinet Office in government or the independent inquiry.
The Science Minister, George Freeman, has been speaking this week, and he says it's very unlikely that the Cabinet Office is going to win this legal challenge. That's almost accepted. So why then would the Cabinet Office take their own public inquiry to court, the inquiry that they asked for, if they know that it's not going to go in their favour?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see what the outcome is of that that particular trial. But I think what the Cabinet Office will be saying is that they want to protect a number of people that obviously weren't ministers, where information is clearly not relevant, where it's on WhatsApp, which is the protection of individuals. In terms of transparency laws, they're quite out of date, because WhatsApp doesn't feature within government communications, or it shouldn't. So WhatsApp is the property of the individual rather than the government. So
I was going to ask you about that. Sorry, I'm just very intrigued. So WhatsApp is used a lot, isn't it, in Westminster for communications? You would know, of course, spending a lot of time with Michael Gove.
So I think for official government communications, it always goes through official channels. So there'll be obviously meetings, there'll be official papers and submissions and emails that are the property of the government, which could be disclosed. I think WhatsApp is not to be used for government purposes in terms of decision-making. But, of course, when you're moving at pace, if you're on a train and somebody says, can you just clear this press release? I mean, that would have come from a government email. It would have gone to your WhatsApp and you can reply
But we're seeing during the Hancock expose that WhatsApp absolutely was routinely used for exchanging ideas quickly between prime ministers and very senior ministers in control. So the Boris phone must have the same sort of detail in it, surely.
I suspect it might, but I think the key thing to articulate as well is that even with WhatsApp messages on confirming documents have been received or signing things off, there still would have been an official channel where those papers would have been produced by the Cabinet Office in the first place, officially.
Yeah.
So those records will be available to the inquiry also. So it's just, how much information can go to the inquiry, and within those WhatsApp messages, is there anything that's political frank, where actually you do have a safe space, and there should be protection for ministers and advisors.
Also juicy lines. I mean, things like, let the bodies pile high, let it rip through. These more kind of throwaway comments that were perhaps used behind the scenes, if they're in WhatsApp groups, and that's a real kind of tabloid angle, a real public interest. So it's not just the policy stuff; it's the type of language used, and that's, I think, where the opponents of Boris would like it to go, at least.
I think that's right, but I think, look, everybody, I think, on a WhatsApp conversation may have said something that, could be taken out of context, or if you don't give a full context. And, that happens all the time. I mean, look, there are WhatsApps that I've, exchanged with friends that I don't really understand what we were talking about 2 weeks ago, let alone 2 years ago when there was the COVID inquiry. So I think that there is a danger of this being a sensationalised sort of scandal about who said what and what was juicy and who was criticising who perhaps, or who was frustrated about this policy, or who was holding whatever. That's all fine to a degree, but is that going to get the answers as to why ministers took decisions to lock the country down 2 or 3 times? Was wearing face masks the right thing to do after a particular date? What impact this has had on schools and education, people's mental health, the backlog that we're seeing in the NHS, the backlog that we're seeing in our courts? These are the real questions that I think are affecting the country, that the inquiry needs to conclude quickly to make sure if we're ever in a situation like this again, any government, whatever party, whatever colour, gets the better results and not worry about perhaps the noise is off, where I think there has to be an element of privacy amongst individuals that are involved.
OK, Charlie Rowley, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very, very much.
I'm going to say, Charlie, you've had your Weetabix today. Nice one, mate. You're on fire. Well done.
I had my cornflakes with milk, with water.
Have you actually had cornflakes this morning? Or are you winding us up?
No, I've had a glass of orange juice and a nice, beautiful cup of tea outside.
But
That's
no tea or coffee on your cornflakes.
No tea or coffee.
Do you know anyone who would do that? Do you know the 13%?
I don't, but if I did, I'd disown them.
Yeah.
But I did. Talking of I used to have peanut butter and Marmite together
I like that.
on toast.
I like that.
Charlie, what?
I do, yeah. It's quite salty, it's quite crunchy, gets you going. It's a good breakfast.
Oh, no, you
combo.
two. No. That's not going to work for me. Thanks, Charlie. Good
Thanks, Charlie.
to see you.
Anyway, back to